Well, I'm excited this morning to be here speaking with you. My topic is called An Open Mind is Divine. And as some of you know, over the last few years, off and on, I've been called to study a bit about quantum physics. And people say, well, why do you need to study it when you have science of mind? And I don't need more than science of mind, but I think that it's great that quantum physics scientifically proves some of the ideas that we believe in. One of the things they've scientifically proven is that there are an unlimited number of possibilities in a given situation, and that change doesn't have to take time. That we can move from an undesirable state of being to a healthy, happy one instantaneously. We can take a quantum leap to our good. So let me begin with a part of my journey. And remember, I am not a scientist or a quantum physicist. So if I say something a little off, for the people in the room who are just, this is my interpretation, the best of my ability. Well, a few months ago, I began listening to an audiobook, 6-disc, called How the Hippies Saved Physics. And it talked about how, over the years, physicists had always questioned things, wondered what more is there to know. And as world events occurred and some of the changes in cultures, the physicists were pressured to stop doing this, to stop asking why, and to stick to basics. And, if you look at history, this is not an unusual occurrence because people who ask why often are the triggers for change, and usually whoever's in power likes to keep the status quo. Still, there were those physicists who came up with far-out theories, such as non-locality, entanglement, and the observer effect. And the book talks a lot about this group of physicists who met every Friday night at Berkeley into the wee hours called the Fundamental Physics Group. And they were some of the ones, there were many, who didn't want to just stick to basics, but wanted to stretch the mind and find out what else there was. And of course, they discussed, as part of their questions, the power of consciousness and its effect on wave particles. Well, I was surprised to learn that as the university funding sort of dried up because it wasn't the thing to do to encourage this kind of research, that Werner Erhard, who founded EST and later LifeSpring, and Michael Murphy, who ran the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, became major supporters of this group and of other physicists. And it seemed like this was where psychology and physics and the search for the meaning of life intertwined. And of course, as all scientists do, form theories and do experiments. And I want to share one of the experiments with you. They took two students who'd been together, knew each other, and they put them each in a separate room. A room that was dark and it had a magnoelectric shield around it. And they set up machines to monitor the students' brains, the EKG machines. And what they would do is one student they would take, and all of a sudden they'd shine a bright light in their eye. And of course then they could see how the EEG reacted, how the student reacted. Well, the amazing thing was the student in the other room who wasn't getting a light shown in their eyes reacted the same instant in the same way. And they did this with loud noises and different things. And this seemed to be valid proof for the entanglement theory, that we're all connected. And also, to me, to the non-locality, that effect doesn't just happen in one place. So to me, this is exciting. Well, continuing on my journey of greater understanding, I watched Amit Goswami on PBS. And this seemed to be an intertwining of physics and religion. One of the most exciting things he said was when he talked about Niels Bohr's theory that when an electron jumps from one orbit to the other, it doesn't have to go through the intervening space. So if you imagine a bunch of little circles, great bigger, bigger, bigger circles, and an electron being in one, and then all of a sudden, it's over here in another. And it didn't have to take the time to go through all the different orbits. It's amazing to me because this shows us that things don't have to take time. You know, it is said that time is what we create. So it also means to me that we don't have to take time to manifest what we want. That people can take a quantum leap and be instantly healed. They can take a quantum leap and go from poverty to prosperity. Think about the people who win the lottery. That's a quantum leap, right? All of a sudden, they're going from mediocre money or maybe limited, and they have millions. And if they keep their consciousness open to that millions, they can stay prosperous. And you know, people in this church have also taken quantum leaps. There's lots of them who've made huge changes in very short times. One of my students from several years ago had decided she wanted to get married again. Well, you know, usually that involves time, right? You got to meet the right guy. You got to go out with him, check him out. He has to check you out. You know, it's a pretty long process. Well, one weekend between classes, she went to Southern California, and she happened to meet her old high school sweetheart. And it didn't take them very long at all before they got married. Also, one of my friends, this wasn't quite as fast a leap, but the one who introduced me to Science of Mind years ago, she had been doing prayer treatment for prosperity. And we were working together in a company, and a new vice president came on board. And they fell in love almost instantly and got married, and she lived and still lives the life very similar to the rich and famous. So it can happen. Another thing that Amit talked about when he was talking about quantum physics was that a quantum wave is a wave of possibility. And this is kind of hard for me to imagine, but the electron is in many places at the same time, only in possibility. And because we live in a thought universe, then the quantum wave function is a thought wave of possibility and potential, and probability comes with that. However, he said, for a single object or a single event, that probabilities don't help. That quantum mathematics had no answer. So that is when they discovered that consciousness chooses. And this was proven in the double slit experiment. I talked about it some other time. I'm not going to talk about it again. But in many experiments, they proved over and over again that thought was the determining factor to decide where things ended up and how they ended up. So it was directed consciousness and intention. And we can do that same thing. And this is what we teach in Science of Mind, in religious science. We can choose believing, and that is what determines our results. Well, in addition to studying and practicing Science of Mind and studying quantum physics, it's also helpful, I think, to read about and hear about people and companies who've taken quantum leaps. And there are many who've done this we live in the center of creativity in Silicon Valley. Well, one of the companies you know about is Apple Computer. And they're known for their imagination and creativity and their ability to design and create new things over and over again, things that were never before in the market. And I worked there during the 90s. And I was going through my drawer one day looking for a t-shirt to wear to exercise, and I pulled out one I've safely saved over the years. And it was a t-shirt that the Apple Computer marketing folks had put together during a product launch. And it was during the time when Mission Impossible was pretty popular. And the t-shirt has on the front a little apple, of course, but underneath it, it says, "Expect the impossible." And I think that's great. That's what other people would call impossible. Apple Computer people didn't. Also, you've probably heard about Pixar. There was actually a documentary on TV about Pixar and how George Lucas and the founding folks of Pixar had this great idea that you could use computers to create an animated film. And they worked and worked, and they had some funding, and as usually happens, the funding starts running out. Well, then they were able to get Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple Computer, interested, and he became a supporter because he believed in passion and vision. And as Pixar moved forward, they did create the first computer animated film. And they created one you know very well, Toy Story. And as I was listening to the documentary, it was so interesting because the person who was talking said, and then we had this great success and we were scared because what about the next one? You know, it's like, look at what I achieved. Are we going to be able to meet that standard? And he said that they had to overcome their fear and they had to believe again with the same passion in order to achieve the next success, which they did. And that's what we teach in Science of Mind, to get clear on what you want, to focus on it with feeling, and to believe in your dream as if it's already here. To do prayer treatment with the passion and the feeling and the knowing that God law has to say yes. Well, another thing that they said, one of the folks that was talking from Pixar said, was that they realized that their success depended on collaboration. And in Science of Mind, of course, we teach oneness. But it meant for them realizing the connectedness of everything and the importance of working together during the production process. And they did it, and they have continued to create success after success. Pixar is now a part of Disney. Two wonderful companies joined together. And John Lasseter, a chief creative officer at Disney and Pixar, said when discussing what their mindset is when they direct a film, he said, "We don't think of children or adults. When producing a film, we think of that fine, clear spot deep inside all of us." I thought, wow, he must be talking about the Christ consciousness, the God self. So it's interesting, isn't it, all these little ways that it shows up, even though the lingo's a little different. Well, back to Amit, he was also talking about energy flow. And he reminded us of something that, psychologists have said this, and I think there's a lot to think about, that sometimes people get afraid, and when they get afraid, they're afraid of being vulnerable and risking being hurt So perhaps they're afraid to fall in love or do something too risky because if it doesn't work, there might be hurt.